Okay, welcome back to the stream. Um, this is for the studio. Today I'm working on adding one of the old screenplays. Actually, I think it's my first screenplay that I've ever written based on the X Men. And I remember this is years ago that I saw the first X Men film that was released by Fox. And, I it was some good things about it, some things that I wasn't a fan of, and so yeah, that's what got me into screenwriting. Is I went home and I just decided to start writing my own version of the film if I ever came out with one, right? And I actually sent it to the corporate office. One is actually in Manhattan Beach. I think the other one is in New York. And at that particular time, they weren't taking on um, any new material, especially unsolicited material. So I started sharing it with, you know, on fan fiction sites and with, friends, classmates, whoever um, would, actually sit down and read it. Ultimately, it turned out to be 199 pages. Now, standard feature length is 120 pages, and I didn't think the story was going to be this long. But as I started writing, I mean, I just kept adding to it. And so I've decided to add it to my vocal profile. I think I can fit this under fan fiction. I think there's a category for this. But yeah, it's 9 parts. I kind of went through the entire story, and then I had to cut it into 9 parts. Um, so I'm hopeful that a lot of Marvel fans, X Men fans will like the story. Actually read through it and be excited about the next part of the story being released, because of course I'm not going to release everything at one time. This is going to be part one, and like I said, it's 9 parts, and then also the other thing is it has to be approved by the vocal curators because they want to manage the content that's on their platform, which is understandable. So I have to get it past them first. So this is part one. And of course, the last art session that we had, I was working on the photography. So this is the other part of it. Let's see how we're gonna. I think it's under brand. I updated or tweaked the banner, and so I want to get that updated on here. I think this is. Let me see if I can check this. There it is. Yeah, I just need to see the thumbnail because I changed it to Roman numerals down here. There we go. And then I tweaked this. I brought this closer together. Okay, so classmates, the first thing, the few that read it, uh, first thing that they said, this is years ago. This is like 2009, 2010, when I started really sharing the story. First thing they said is epic. It's like an epic sort of um, film, and my approach to it was, in terms of characters, include as many characters as I can um, within the X Men universe, but I based this off of the the '90s Fox Kids cartoon, which I loved watching. Right, base it on that, and the main thing is that that's where I started. So in the animated series, the X Men are pretty much all adults except for Jubilee. She's the only teen coming in um, as far as the cast. And even in this screenplay that I have, she's older in college, but again, everyone else they're adults, and at this particular point, there's no war. Like the war, the conflict between humans and mutants is it's um, not where it was. So there's a lull, and I would say it's been about a few years. As far as the actual conflict. You know, and so now my only challenge here is to take a screenplay and format it differently, because I typed this all up in Final Draft, and it's going to be a little bit tricky to put it in here. So right now I've already started with, instead of having the names like centered in over the dialogue and having the dialogue indented, everything is sort of, this is still capitalized, but the dialogue is like right next to the name. I still have the location headings here. So all of that's the same. So it's going to be a little tricky. I'm a little bit nervous about like if people are going to be able to follow along as far as the action and then who's speaking, that type of thing. So I'm gonna try to simplify it as much as possible. Like this is the conversation with Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, that they're having with their dad, who's Magneto, and basically all of this here is Xavier is basically giving a voiceover about the world and everything I just explained. Society, how society has adjusted, and how everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but it's like the large part of the world's population is like, okay, it's time to move on in terms of human mutant relationships, and like I was saying before, the conflict. um More people than not are ready to move on, move forward in a positive way. So the other thing too is I think that I'm going to leave the page numbers in, because I mean, if you look at the word count down here, it's over 5,000. So it's going to, hopefully it won't be annoying, and it'll help give readers a marker to where they are in the story um, within this particular post. So if you have to drop something, well, like you get interrupted in the middle of reading, you can kind of have a marker of where you are in the story. So then when you come back, it's like, okay, I already passed page two, um, and you can go from there. And then this is page three. But yeah, at this point, Magneto is, you know, I wouldn't say he's pouting, um, but yeah, like I said before, there's no conflict at this point, but he's not embracing society as a whole at the same time. So his kids are trying to get him to loosen up some and be more a part of the world where the world is now and in moving forward, in changing, right? So for him and everything that he's been through to make him who he is, that's going to be really difficult to do. And so that's the conversation that they're having right now. So for this particular writing session is really just editing and making sure that all of this is where it needs to be. Um, Consistency, all of that. So I think with the page numbers, I will put an extra space there. But for the headers, the location headers, I don't think that I'm going to add an extra space. And that's what I was debating before. Yeah, and all of these are basically screenplay marks in terms of if someone's talking, but then someone interrupts them, then you put two hyphens together with that. Even if it's just someone speaking, right? There's dialogue, and then all of a sudden an action takes place. You also use the two hyphens to cut them off and then to start that action um, sequence. So yeah, I think that this is gonna take a little while. I think this might go into 20s as far as pages, or to the low 30s, page 30, somewhere in there. Um, but yeah, I just need that consistency. Okay, we got page 8. I mean, and of course, Scott and Jean are still together, right? Um, yeah, they're still together. They're still together. So at this point, the X Men are, everyone's gone their separate ways, right? And have gone to living their own lives, outside of the Xavier Institute. They're not on call, right? Like, so yeah, it's normal. It's normal, and it's weird. And I had to. I started writing the screenplay at the climax of it because I had something that I saw in my mind that I absolutely wanted to see on screen, like on the big screen. That's where I started. Then I had to work backwards and forwards in terms of, okay, how did I get to that scene, and then what's going to happen after that scene, right? But that particular action sequence, I definitely wanted that to be in the film, and that kicked off everything else. Filling in all these gaps was definitely a challenge, but I mean, I like all of the characters, um, and I just bought like a scrapbook that you're really supposed to sketch in, but I started writing all of my notes in that. Okay, there's page 9. All right. So Scott and Jean are going to watch the sunset. They are in New York. Um, they just came out of the diner. They're in New York City. And they're, like I said, they're together. Now we're going to move on to Canada, where we got an intro for Logan, Wolverine. So, yeah, this is a bit of a jump. I'm just making sure that. Okay, so page 10. Now I realize that some films, like one of the Mission Impossible films that I'm thinking about, they start out with an action scene, like this action scene that actually happens in the middle of the film, but they put it in the beginning of the movie because they want to just grab everyone's attention. For me, well, for this particular screenplay, I figured this is going to be extremely character driven. So I want, and especially because there's so many characters that I have included in the screenplay, I have to start introducing people right away. And it's not like a an origin story in terms of introduction. It's just simply seeing them on screen, letting them have these conversations. Um, and what's weird about this is a Wolverine starts having a conversation with Iceman, and this was not even in the animated series, and I don't think. I mean, they touched on it a little bit in the movies between Wolverine and Iceman, but in the movies, Iceman was a lot younger, still, a student in school. Um, so their interactions weren't really like okay, they're on the same level, right? In terms of experience. Iceman was still, at the point where he's just coming into his own, and Wolverine is old, right? But I wrote it in a way that, again, Iceman's already an adult. He and Wolverine have fought side by side plenty of times, and they've also sparred with each other plenty of times, and so that's how this scene starts, right? Where Wolverine is out on his own, like I said, in Canada. Iceman is basically coming to check on him, right? But Iceman's on his way to, gosh, where did I have him going? Maybe the Arctic. I mean, I had him going. Yeah, he was off to the Arctic, so he's going off to someplace like extremely cold, right? And then he's saying that his powers are continuing to grow, so he wants to see what else he can do, right? So he's older, he's an adult, but he's not an old guy, right? So, but again, he's going through Canada, checking on Wolverine, and then eventually they end up into this sparring session. So in terms of having action at the beginning of the film, um, this is definitely a sequence that I liked, but I was inspired. This scene, the action sequence, or the sparring session was inspired by the video game that was on Sega Saturn. I think it was on Sega Saturn. It was either Sega Saturn or it was Dreamcast, where it was called Children of the Atom, and basically you could pick Wolverine, pick Iceman, and it was like a Mortal Kombat type game, right? Um, Player versus player. So those particular fights that you can have in that game, I like the style of the fights and certain abilities that Iceman had and what he could do. So I took certain parts of that and incorporated it into their sparring session, right? And I really don't want to call it a fight scene because they're not fighting, but they're going at each other, and so yeah, it's just one of those things that I feel like would be very interesting. And I was thinking about the actual films that came out, the live action films, and I was thinking that type of stuff is some something that felt like it was missing in, because I'm going off of what I saw in the first film where you had Hugh Jackman, um, you had Halle Berry, and then Sabretooth was in that film as well. Magneto was there, of course, Professor X, you know. So certain things I felt were were missing, and this is one of the things that I wanted to add into the film if I was the screenwriter for it, right? So yeah, they get into this sparring session and they're really going at it, right? They're going back and forth. So again, um, once this story, or if it's approved, and again this will be part one of nine, then I'll come back and let everyone know that okay, the story is approved, it's available. A lot of times it takes the curators. It can be the next day. It can be 3 days later, 4 days later. It depends on one. It depends on the story, right? And it depends on how many stories they're actually curating at the time, like reviewing at the time to be published. And so right now, I don't know how busy the readers are. Um, and if and also if this, because I haven't seen much of the fan fiction stuff on Vocal, so I don't know how strict or how lenient they are about this type of material. But anyway, I'm gonna see how this goes. Okay, page 13. All right, so Iceman takes off across the valley, and of course Wolverine's up in the mountains. It's just snowy. It's cold. So they go through their sparring session, and then Iceman takes off. All right, so that's page 13. Now, beginning of page 14, we are going to Germany in a church. And this is where we see Nightcrawler, Rogue, and Gambit are having a conversation. And again, it goes back to my point of this this film being really character driven. And then the other thing that I wanted to do with stuff like this is use their names, like their actual names at certain times when they're talking to each other. So instead of their code name or their superhero name, um, because I felt like it would be more personable. Um, so yeah, that's something that I wanted to do. But anyway, Rogue and Gambit are together with their off and on relationship they're on at this point, and they are visiting Kirk or Nightcrawler. Um, and I'm trying to. Okay, so this is where my last editing left off. I got through page 13. So stuff like this, when I brought it in from Final Draft into Vocal, the format's not gonna be correct. It's gonna come in all funky. So that's what I've been correcting. Okay, so now I remember. Kirk was actually in a show, like, because Kirk is a performer, acrobatic performer, right? So Rogue and Gambit actually went and saw the show, um, because Kirk, with his, well, him being blue, being able to teleport and everything like that, like he grew up in a circus, if I remember correctly. So he's like used to performing and having this show, and it kind of hid his, I don't know if I can say hid his like appearance, or so people wouldn't be scared of him. They just think, okay, this is a performance or this is an act. Is a person in a costume or with paint on his face or whatever, right? So he was able to incorporate himself into society more smoothly by presenting himself as this acrobatic performer. I don't have a home button on this keyboard, but that would be helpful in this with this right here. Yeah, but Nightcrawler is a little bit of a daredevil in terms of like agility, what he can do, um, and then he incorporates the teleporting in within all of that, and so it's just it gets crazy. Okay, so like I said, they saw Kirk perform, and they're just catching up. Um, and let's see. Okay, so this is odd, and I ran into this a few pages before. So her name is just floating. I'm gonna have to take that out. I'm gonna have to check on the actual, because I printed this out. I printed the screenplay out so I can check on this page and see what this is. Like if the dialogue got cut out or the action got cut out or if this got misplaced. Let me just check over this again. Okay, it got misplaced. There it is. All right, so it's actually supposed to be there. All right, there we go. The other thing I was learning, because I purchased the Hollywood Standard, which is the Bible or the guide for screenwriting. When you're in the same, like a house, right, and you're going from one room to the next, you don't have to put the full, location header again. You just put whatever room they're going to. So that's also helpful with shortening up your location headers. One thing that I'm kind of not great on is names. When I come up with a new character, it's like, when am I gonna name this person? And a lot of times I put just placeholders, and then I have to, during editing, I have to go back and change some things when I actually come up with a name for them. So these two guests are on TV, and this, of course, is in Germany, right? And they're arguing about, or there's a debate on whether this is real peace between humans and mutants, or are the mutants just biding their time, um, in order to, have humans put their guard down, so that that'll give them a chance to strike, right? So they're these two guests on TV. They're going back and forth. Okay, so the continued is when they're in the middle of their dialogue, and you're in the middle, of a paragraph or a sentence to the paragraph, and you have to continue that on the next page. And so that's what I probably got caught in here with that. So I can get rid of those with the way that it's. There we go. But I think that you're always going to have that. You're always going to have people with differing viewpoints of the world, right? But the thing is that you can have that, and you're going to have that naturally, but that doesn't mean that there's always got to be conflict, right? There has to be a middle ground. In a lot of cases, there can be a middle ground, unless the other side, their viewpoint is so falling off the cliff that there's just no way. There is no common ground there, right? So, and see, this is where I want my home button, because I would just click home, and I can go to the front of the sentence. And you just go there. And then the host is like, are mutants trying to take over, or are they simply trying to be accepted like everyone else? Send in your answers to our blog. We'll post some of your responses in our next broadcast. Now you can tell this is kind of old, because instead of using a blog, they were like, reply on Twitter or something like that. Reply on Twitter. I don't know if people use Facebook as much right now, but I would definitely say like reply on Twitter or something like that, especially for the news outlets. Yeah, Rogue is. His her dialogue is kind of jumping. And then I'll get rid of continued again. So at this point, Nightcrawler is well, I won't say worried, but his antenna is up, his spidey sense is going off. Um, I think I'm gonna add that right in there. And Gambit, of course, is trying to play it down because he's not trying to get back into that life of just there's confrontation somewhere. There's a fight, there's a battle somewhere. And then Rogue's point is really good because when they were the X Men, like a team, you know, and they like they were in a position even in the eyes of the government, like they'll just show up, right, without having to call somebody, get permission from somebody, that type of thing. They'll just show up, save the day. Okay, we're gonna leave. But they've been separated for so long and out of that game for so long that it's like, well, we just can't decide to show up because now it's like it's intruding, it'll be awkward. It'll start setting off alarms, that type of thing. So now it's, more difficult to say, okay, we're concerned about something, we're just gonna investigate or start snooping around. There it is again. Rogues. And it's not even a long sentence. It's just the dialogue is out of place. And this, with these two saying great, like one behind the other, I'm trying to show the reader that Rogue and Gambit have been around for so long that they kind of are. You know how you've been around the same person, you've been in a relationship so long that you kind of say what the other person usually would say, or you start finishing each other's sentences, that type of thing. So I wanted to put a little bit of that in here. I'm gonna have to go back and fix this, aren't I? Because her name is just floating in the middle of nowhere again. And it's only her. It's like the third or fourth time. Um, Let me go down a little bit more and see if this starts to make sense. Okay, so their scene is over. And then I'm going to go back up and just. I'll put an extra space there because that is a jump. You're going from Germany to Russia. Yes, to Russia. Yeah, there's oh my gosh. This the story, like I said before, I started with this sort of climactic action scene and it was like 5 seconds. I just saw it in my mind. It turned, and that was in the middle of New York, right? It turned into this global, um, like jumping from one country to the next country, um, continent to continent, and I started losing track of people and everything that was going on. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this is gonna get so out of control. So this would definitely work in, I don't think as a single film. And I wouldn't cut the film like a feature film in two parts. I would make it like the Obi-Wan Kenobi um was like a mini series of episodes. Like Obi-Wan was like 6 episodes, which I really liked it. Um I think it would work like that instead of everything in one or two sittings of a film. I think, but yeah. Okay, so Rogue, Nightcrawler again, but they decide, okay, we gotta see where what everybody else thinks, and so they're gonna leave Germany, come back to the U.S. We are, I think this is a brief switch. Underground facility in Russia. And again, this is one of the things that it's like, okay, what am I gonna name this person? And then the scientist says we're in phase two of the process, and so the general is just checking up and asking questions, basically just getting an update of what's going on. Okay, so that's the end of page 18. Now, in terms of the way I'm changing the formatting, it might be a little bit awkward at first, but I'm thinking that by this point in the story, because we're on page 19 now, that readers will say, "Oh, okay, I see how this is this is formatted because it's a little bit um, it's shifting more towards the format of a novel, but it's keeping the character headings like a screenplay. And of course, they're talking about duplicating the process. They're trying to, well, they're doing an experiment, doing experiments. Yeah, so this is all bad news. And considering where we are now in 2022 with Russia and Ukraine, this kind of is in that ballpark of because when I was writing it and I'm thinking, well, this is back in what 2009, I want to say maybe 2010, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly when that film came out. Um, but back then it was when I was writing it, I was thinking I don't want to imply that certain countries or the governments of certain countries are evil, you know. But that's basically what I had to do, you know, in order to make or have the story that I'm writing now make sense. So it's like bringing these real world issues and then injecting these comic book characters into that. That's the part I wasn't sure, and I'm still not sure, like how everyone's gonna take that. But again, seeing where we are now in 2022 is more feasible. Like it's not so hard to swallow, to me. Because if you look at what the general is saying, he's basically saying or having the same gripes as President Putin is having or has had the past few years, and which led to what's going on with Ukraine. So this particular character, like I said, I wrote, gosh, over 10 years ago. Same gripes, and so again, he's taking these really radical steps in order to fix what he sees as the problem. Um, yeah, so he's going back and forth with the scientists trying to get an update on okay, how is the plan coming along. But again, the scientist is not a prisoner in this situation because they have the same viewpoint, the same worldview. Okay, so now that was page 19. We're going to page 20. We start getting into, oddly enough, US politics. So, again, back then when I was writing it, it was like, is this going to be too weird? Because again, I'm putting these comic book characters into like these real world um, scenarios. But now looking at this screenplay and looking at how Marvel came out with all the, after watching the Avengers movies, it's like, okay, this works, right? But it's a little bit closer, I would say, to how Christopher Nolan wrote the the Batman trilogy, or I should say the Dark Knight trilogy. Um, it's like that, where you do have this world that's built where now is based a lot closer to reality and not so much on like this comic book fan fiction type thing, right? So yeah. And then I think that for this screenplay for mine, it probably pushes it even further into the real world because of the scale that I'm using. But yeah, I think that this would work. Now, the other thing I was thinking of, could this be um, a graphic novel, which is why I contacted the Marvel office in New York. But again, they had already like had writers on board, as I was told, with darn near similar story, right? Similar story, and like some aspects of it as had already been done as a graphic novel. So I'm like, oh man, right? But um, I think they were they responded, they respected the work that I had, the work that I had um, at that point. But again, really, that taught me it's like once you have an idea, you really have to push your work out there, um, and establish your name because like you're not the only one that's gonna have the idea. you know, you're really not. I mean, it reminds me of another screenplay that I was working on last year, and I think the beginning of this year there was it was more of a low budget film it seemed, but it was like looked like the same sort of idea, right? I think their approach was a little bit more like graphic, but um, than my rough drafts, but basically in that same vein. So yeah, it's just when you have an idea, you really have to push it because at this point, it's a lot. It's still difficult for movies to be made, but you have more avenues to pitch your work because you got Amazon Originals, you got Netflix, you got these, different streaming services. There's just so many more avenues to get your work out there. And so now everybody, a lot more, writers have access to, all these avenues. And so you just have to compete and see what happens. But for me, I think that I found where I'm needed in terms of okay, not a lot of people are writing about this certain thing, right? So I'm leaning towards that in terms of the types of screenplays that I really want to focus on pitching to production companies and promoting. Um, but yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be really careful now because now this is Tony Richards, Tim Michelson. Just got to forgive my name choice. I was just like, I'm just gonna think of some names, give them that. Oh boy, it's rough. They're going back and forth. Now, see, here's the thing, and we all know this. In front of the camera, politicians say one thing. Behind the camera, they're going to say something else, right? So again, 2022, how it's been the past. Oh my gosh, I want to say over 5 years now. Um, the I mean, politics in general is like, please don't bring it up. Don't bring it up at work. Don't bring it up at family reunions. Just talk amongst yourselves, but not out there, you know, because it'll turn into an argument really, really quickly. It's just it's not going to end well. But yeah, there's a little bit of that in here where it shows the sort of battle within politics of this is what we say, but this is what we're gonna do. And yeah, I didn't like it back then when I was writing all this stuff, but you know. And that's the other thing that I had to learn because I believe this is my first attempt at, even though this is not original um in terms of characters, but it helped me to understand I'm going to have to write characters that I can't stand. Like it's I'm gonna have to write characters that I really don't like in terms of their personality, their actions, their behavior, stuff like that. So yeah, I gotta get I had to get used to that. Still getting used to that. But they're discussing now that all of the politicians that basically were honest, right? They weren't two faced. They just said whatever they thought. They're losing their um I guess it's like a primary or they're losing the election, right? Whoever they're running against, the other person's winning, right? So hold on, this is weird. Yeah, and they're not even talking about in the US. They're talking about in other countries. So France, Germany, Russia, different countries in the Middle East. I mean, this is, and again, it goes back to my point where I was trying to, I ended up making this a global sort of event that was going on. Okay, so this part is completely out of place, and I'm gonna have to figure out where it goes. I'm gonna take out continued. Yeah, it's completely out of order. And it's just these three lines, but yeah, this might be three separate things. Okay, so that's when the news broadcast starts. Okay, so Richards and Michelson are watching the news in an office. There's the TV. Well, the news. Actually, I have host instead of anchor. Yeah, Richards is not having it. He's not with the whole gather around the campfire and sing kumbaya. He's not there. Okay, so I'm gonna go through page 21 and see if any of that makes sense in terms of where that that text got misplaced. But yeah, the Richards character, the policy, he's extreme. He's he has fallen off the wagon. So um yeah, he has lost it. I don't know what else to tell you. Now Michelson, he agrees with Richards, right? But he's to the point now where it's like, dude, it's over. Get over it. You know, just it's done. Yeah, so he's telling Richards like we'd be put on trial for hate crimes. I mean, that's where it is. Now, back when I was writing this, it was bad back then, but it wasn't like what it is right now. So, because this is the pre-Trump era, era. Um, right now, I mean, it just surprises me how much we still talk about President Trump, and he's been out of office for a year, over a year and a half, really. And it's just like, oh my goodness, it's crazy. All right, so I've gotten through page 21. I don't see where that text goes from page 20 that was kind of just floating. So there's different degrees of crazy or of hate or anger or something like that. So Michelson is kind of low key to medium in the middle somewhere. Richards is like high key, all out, crazy, hateful. So yeah, they're even between them, they have their disagreements on how to deal with certain things. Because Michelson only go to a certain point. Richards is like that. That's not far enough. You got to keep going. So it's like even within the Republican or the Democratic, party, you will have different tiers, or different branches, or I guess I can say like sub branches of that party, where they kind of agree on the main things, but then it's like, how do you get to that point? They can be radically different. So yeah. And when I was writing this, I didn't realize, really that's what I was doing. But now that I'm looking back at it, it's like, oh yeah, that definitely makes sense. Because now, especially in the Democratic Party, you got your progressives, you got your moderates, and then you got maybe a few here and there conservative Democrats, right? And then I think that happened in the Republican Party as well, where you had your Tea Party members, and now they're talking about the MAGA crowd or whatever. Um, it it can be confusing. I think it's been, gosh, quite a few years that I switched to independent because I'm like I'm not keeping up with all this stuff anymore with the sides and all that. So okay, so Richards is has decided that he's got one last chance to mess everything up. So he's gonna take that chance. It's his job. Because you just can't have peace. I mean, you can't. It can only be peace when you win, right? When your side wins. Now, if your side is not winning or looks like it's not gonna win, then you're just gonna have to make a fuss and be difficult. This looks like it's supposed to go at the beginning. Oh, that's why. You know what? I skipped right over that part. They both lost. Richards and Michelson lost to somebody who's not officially on the ballot, he was a write-in. Like a bunch of voters wrote in Donaby, and then the Republican and the Democrat senators lost. Oh wow, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, so I'm just gonna have to erase this out because I think I'm getting towards the end. Okay, that's better. And I didn't fix that other part, so I'm thinking like I feel like that's my strength. It's the dialogue, not so much the action sequences, even though that's really where I start with most of the screenplay ideas I have. But in terms of writing, the back and forth, right? And so when I decided to get back into writing, um, that's where I started. Just two people or a group of people, whatever, start a conversation and see where the story goes from there, or see what story is there to begin with. This is a little bit of a jump too, but it's not a big jump though. So introducing another character, we're still dealing with Michelson and Richard, the two politicians who lost, the senators who lost. They're calling Sean Johnson, and Sean isn't actually expected this call sooner. Because I think Sean was at the point where he was like, why are you going to wait until you lose? You lose the election to call me. It's like, I mean, like, what are you going to do now? Yep, that's exactly what he's saying. It's like you guys are late. So yeah, all this stuff is going on behind the scenes with the Democrat and the Republican politician. And not to get too in the weeds with politics, but I would say that that's how President Trump got elected, because a lot of people were saying, well, half the country is racist, or all this other type of stuff, right? But if you look at the past 20, 30 years at the government, right? It's been going back and forth between, you'll have Democrat president, Republican Congress, then you'll have a Republican president, Democratic Congress and majority, or some type of combination. Then sometimes you'll have Republican president, Republican majority in Congress, Democratic president, Democratic majority in Congress. But they never, the one side never stays in power, because no matter who was in charge, right, or the combination of who was in charge, there's always these things that are not getting done. And then when these things don't get done, they blame the other party and say, oh, they're holding us up. Oh, it's their fault, blah, 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 right? So finally, Donald Trump comes along, and he's not a part of any party, even though he ran under the Republican Party. He's not a Republican. He's definitely not a Democrat. He is himself. He's all into his own. Like it's just about him, right? And so he started saying, "Well, this is what I think needs to happen," right? Um, in terms of policy, right? Some of the stuff is the same old that we've seen all the time. Um, and some of the stuff I would agree with him in terms of policy, but his personality is just so, oh my gosh, it's and some of the stuff that he would say, how he would say it, mannerisms, it's just like, oh my gosh. So it was bad. It was bad. And then okay, so another thing would be like you look at the well, what's going on right now, and like he's saying that the election was stolen from him, something like that. For me, I just think that that first presidential debate, um, because I actually sat there and I watched the whole thing. It was terrible. I think that that just did not help him at all. I think that's where he lost the election because that was bad. So yeah, I think that's where he lost. Um, and of course there were some shady things going on, but that's like every election, right? Back to back to Abraham Lincoln. I mean, like every election has had things going on in it that were like shady. You got stuff going on the table. You is that's every election. So it's like we have a democracy, but it's like kind of fixed. Like who can get things leaning in their favor, right? So that they can win. That's that's basically been like every election that you I mean, like I said, back to Abraham Lincoln, if not before then. So there's been, documentaries and these series on TV or the History Channel or whatever. And it's like this it's I mean, it's elections. People try to fix it and get things going in their favor. So that's not new. But yeah, and so with this particular screenplay, again, they're trying to dictate policy by, of course, by who wins. Now, if one person wins, the policy can be one way. If another person wins, the policy for the country can be a different way. And so it's all about making sure that you get the votes so that you can do what you want to do instead of what the other person wants to do. And then, as you can see, they've been working with Sean for, yeah, 10 years, over 10 years. So his account is already set up with them. He's already been, and I don't know you would call him a contractor for these politicians, but that's basically that's basically what's going on. Okay, so Sean's name is floating out and there's no dialogue attached. All right, so now I think, and that's kind of odd. So I'm going to make sure that there's nothing missing. in terms of dialogue. Because it looks like dialogue is supposed to be right here before we go to page 23. Okay, so that's not the one I wanted. I thought I printed this one out, but I didn't. Okay, so we go save. Here we go. So once I fix the, let me see how I can look through this. I can get the file folder. I'm still getting used to using Apple. I'm so used to being on my PC laptop. I'm just gonna remember where everything is. Okay, so all this stuff came from my PC. And I just drug it over here. And again, down here at the bottom, I do have the 1 terabyte model for the iPad Pro. So I'm thinking this one. Screenplay is completed. Nope, those are different. There we go, adaptation. This one. And I think it's this. Yep, here we go. If I click this. Yeah, so here it makes total sense, right? But when you copy it over, it might not. That's page 29. Okay, here we go. That looks about right there. Or is it the page before? Let me see. Let me get my gestures right. You have to move. Okay, so it says 22. Yeah, that's where it is. Right there. This. I can't highlight it like I want to. There it is. Cut. Paste. And I think that's what it is. Yep, that's what it is. Yeah, and again, I wrote all of this in Final Draft, switching from my PC to here. I don't even know where the product key is anymore. So I checked up on the price today. Depending on the sale, it can be like $170 for Final Draft. Between 170 and maybe 200, 230 for the Final Draft software. But it's really good. I like it. But again, I bought the Hollywood Standard book because there's just certain formatting questions that I have. There's quite a few of them. So, yeah, see, this is where that messed up at. So, this is what happens when they say something at the same time. So, Rogue says, "This is a gut feeling," as you would see it, and they both say great at the same time. Oh boy. All right. So I'm gonna go back up and fix that. But yeah, for the iPad, I'm still getting used to gestures now. If you want to scroll, it's two fingers. If you want on the trackpad, right? If you want to switch pages, you go three fingers and push up, and then it'll show you what's open, right? And then you just do a single click to pick whatever, right? Um, can you miss gesture something? Of course. Of course. You can like slide pages over and it's like I didn't mean to do that and it's oh my gosh. So I have to be awake when I'm using this. Let me go back up. Yeah, so this is her. And I don't think there's a way for me to do side by side with this one. Okay, so let me go to this conversation with, well, when they first started that conversation. And then the page number is up here in the corner. But yeah, and then the crazy thing was is that I actually wrote this in Microsoft Word, I think. And then I was finally able to buy Final Draft. I had to move everything over. That was a nightmare. So, yeah, and then I took screenwriting class at Azusa Pacific University, which is in Southern California. Um, and that was also very helpful. The other thing I can't do in vocal is single space it like this, which is why I ended up moving the dialogue to right beside the name. It says officials are now scrambling to figure out if they can award a seat to a citizen who hasn't actually ran for the office. Oh boy, this is really good. Okay, that's funny. No, I legit think that would work. Like the people that I see, like reporting the news and or hosting like a news show or whatever. I have a few favorites that I listen to, and I'm sitting there like, you would be a better senator or somebody in the House of Representatives, right? You would be a better candidate than the people we have in there right now. So I think too often it's like the people who really care about everybody in their community, like they're not running for office, and that's the problem. The people who are running for office, well, too many of them. It's just like they want that position, they want the power, they want the money, influence, all that type of stuff, right? So when it just ends up they're enriching themselves, and then when it comes to their actual job of what they're supposed to do in terms of helping other people, that's really not getting done. And again, that's been for decades. So I don't know. It's tough because the people who are really suited for the position, they're not running. They're not in politics. They just go out there with their hard hat on, and they go to work and they do what they're supposed to do. Um, but yeah, they're not politicians. They're just normal folks. But those are the people who need to be in charge, or those are the types of people who need to be in these government positions in creating law, right? So we need more people like that to get into. I wouldn't even say go to Washington D.C. I wouldn't even go to move to Washington D.C. I would just like stay where you are, run your state the way that you know it needs to be run, and that's it. You don't need to go to Washington D.C. because for some reason, like even people that start out being like they're good people, right? They get to Washington D.C. and I don't know what in the world happens, but it's infested, or it's a plague. It's contagious, but it just becomes about money and power and influence and control and all that other type of stuff. So it's like, you know what? Stay in your state. Maybe come to Washington D.C. if you got to vote on something, and then go back home. I mean that's a possibility. This is missing, I think, or it might not be. I might have skipped over it. Hold on. Okay, that's good. Da, da, da. Nope, it's there. It's there. Okay, and then I do have to. All right, page 23. Let me see how this where this number falls. Yeah, so this is actually 23, and the 22 is up here. So this is on 23. Whoops, it went up. Yeah, so that's right. This 22's up that way, 23, and it goes down this way. It's just that the number is falling at the bottom of this instead of being up here above it somewhere. Now, I don't want to ruin the story too much, um, because there's a bunch of details I'm trying to skip over. But Um. Okay, so Sean is done with his conversation, and you notice that Sean is talking to Michelson. So Michelson, again, he's kind of leaning more towards where um, Tony Richards is in terms of like we have to do something to stop losing these elections. Um, but anyway, Sean is married to Heather. I don't know. That's just the name I came up with. There's probably a better name than Heather, but that's what I got. And we have another job to do, so they're a team, right? Married couples that work together, that has to be like that has to help the relationship, right? To be more stable or solid. Hopefully, you're not like literally partners in crime, but I think that's where this relationship is between these two. I will say, like, okay, so again, I think this is considered an adaptation instead of an original, right? Um, this was so easy to write because it wasn't easier. It's easier to write when the characters are already established. I did include actually quite a few new characters in here. In terms of Sean Heather, the politicians, um, government officials, like like there's a huge chunk of it is made up, but the foundation of it is Marvel characters, and so that made it easier to jump into and start writing. Um, and then I would really test myself with the characters that I have to make up because um, I need the story to make sense, right? So the direction the story started to go is like, oh my! Every time I turn around, okay, I got to make a character for this. I got to make a character for this. So yeah, I am not well versed with their weapons that they're using. I was just making up stuff I either saw in television or in a different movie or something. I was just like, oh, this would be cool for them to have. Okay, so this looks like another simultaneous response. That's what it looks like. So this is 24. So let me. Yeah, see the continues here in formatting. That's really, it's like Sean is talking, there is action, but then he starts talking again. Like he just picks up where you left off, like in terms of dialogue. So I did put a continue there, and I think that's the correct way to do it if I remember correctly. And then this is the action, but the action this is not a it's not gonna break to a different location, so or a dialogue. So I put continued here, continued here. Um, I don't know, that might not be right. Yeah, and their conversation is continuing on. So this is right. The other one up there, I'm not entirely sure about that one. Okay, so here's the what. I think that's where I was looking, right? Okay, so I don't want to go side to side. I want to go up in there. When charged, it's actually sharp enough to pierce your own armor. And of course, she has to say what. All right, so yes, this. It's a little bit. It's difficult to select things on here. I don't think this is the right order, and I'll just double check it. And I'm gonna skip the continued. All right, so let me double check that part. What? Yes, where did you find? Yep, that's good. All right, so I think we're getting towards the end of this of part 1. This is there are some questions even I don't ask. Okay. Yeah, so Sean is working more closely with the two senators. Um and again, one's Republican and one is Democrat, but their personalities are pretty similar, right? Um but Sean is not asking a whole bunch of questions. Okay, so now we finally have a big jump in location. So I put an extra space there. And I try to separate the parts by ending in an appropriate spot in the story. And by appropriate I'm saying like it'll leave it will leave the reader like thinking, okay, what's gonna happen next or what's about to happen, something like that. So when I was watching the Kenobi series, they did that where they kept ending the episode on, oh my gosh, she got caught, or she's going to get caught, or, are they gonna, and it's weird on those prequels because it's like, they're not gonna die, but it's like, oh my gosh, they're about to die. And obviously they're not, but they still leave it on these cliffhangers. It's like, oh no, what's gonna happen? Which makes absolutely no sense from the viewer standpoint because we've already seen the movies that happened after that and they're okay. So why are we freaking out? I don't know. I don't know. But that's what happens. Okay, so Professor Xavier at the beginning of the film, he has his voiceover, right? But actually in the film, this is the first time that we're seeing him. Okay, so we are inside, going inside. So we got Kirk, Rogue, Gambit starting their conversation with Professor X, which I don't know if they ever called him Professor X in the films, the live actions. I'm not sure. I can't remember, to be honest. It's been so long since I've seen those movies. And it's crazy because my favorite one is probably First Class, and that's not even the original cast. And it felt First Class felt like a spin-off from, you know, the other films, the direction that they were going. Yeah, so it feels like I'm getting to the end of this edit. And then, like I said, I'll go ahead and submit it. Um, and then if you guys run across anything weird, if the story is approved, you run across anything weird, just let me know in the comments or send me a direct message. Um, if I'm on stream, you can let me know in the chat. So far, I haven't gotten anything weird as far as the stories that I've already published. Like you really misspelled something, or you left out words, or this part is confusing, that type of thing. Okay, so there's his name and no dialogue. And it's 26. Okay, there it is. No, I'm wondering where it went. Oh, there it is up here. And again, I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, I hate when it does that. It jumps out of order. How far down did I go? Well, way down. Okay, so I'm not almost finished. um, yeah, it goes to like page 33, and I'm on 26, wrapping up on 26. Okay, so I'm just gonna type this one in, retype it. And at this point, I think Professor Xavier's trying to keep a level head with this, even though Nightcrawler has concerns about what certain people are saying on the news who have influence. I think he realizes that everybody's happy. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you can get used to being in a battle. Just, it becomes a part of normal life. And then when a battle is over for a few years, it's like, then you realize, do I really want to go back to that? Of course not. So having like little hints of something bad happening again and having to restart the battle, everybody's going to have their reservations about, you know, going back to, where it was before, the way it was before. And I like this part where Xavier says, Besides, I finally realized we can't fight forever. There has to be an absolute end to this conflict. One side has to win." Okay, this is weird because the okay, so there's a page change in the middle of Gambit's dialogue, which is why you have more here, continue, continued, continued here, because he's still talking. So, you know what? I think. I'm gonna get rid of all this. Okay, and then I'm gonna go 27. There we go. That looks better. Okay, so Xavier's saying, well, he's telling Gambit the X Men have been more closely watched by the government for the past 5 years. If we move first, we'll be blamed for any consequences that follow. So yeah, now they're kind of thinking out loud, and everybody's putting their thoughts or whatever on the table. And again, it goes back to the reluctance of, you want to keep the peace, but at the same time, you don't want to get caught in a bad position and then you have to be reactive instead of proactive. Now, in the animated series for X Men, they did have, gosh, I want to say two, at least one, but maybe even two episodes with Nightcrawler, which it was really good. But that character was pretty serious, if I remember correctly. I don't know, so I definitely wanted to have some of that in terms of his personality in here. Okay, there's a weird break. Professor Xavier turns and heads back towards where? Yeah, I see there's that weird break again. So this stuff down here, the foyer, panel, door, these words are probably out of place somewhere. So the when I ran into that earlier, I should have just checked the the original format for this. Yeah, so I'm on page 29 right now. Yeah, here it is. Towards the foyer. I have no idea why some of these weird breaks happen, but that's what it is. Yeah, because here's the foyer down here when it's supposed to be up here. And it's like, what in the world happened? Now I gotta look for this because that's, weird. Oh, here it is. Chair, panel, a door. That's in the action after no. That is weird. This just ended up out here, but it's supposed to be in here. So let me confirm that really quick, and then I'll add it in. Pushes a button on the chair panel. There it is. Yeah, so there's gonna be a mistake near near the top. Because I didn't realize where those words were coming from. They're probably in the paragraph above where I took them out. Okay, New York condo in the evening. Scott Summers is pacing the bedroom carpet in a tank shirt and some shorts, and unsure, almost distressed look on his face as he talks to Jean, who is still in the bathroom. Yes, I put that in here too, where Scott is, uh, do we want to say slightly overprotective of Jean Grey, or you know, yeah, that's what happens. Now, the other inspiration for this is I collected, I think it's the Greg and Tim Hildebrandt Marvel cards. So, if I remember correctly, Scott and Jean had a child, um, named her Rachel Summers, and she became Phoenix. And I'm not sure how that, like, is that like a multiverse thing, or I don't know. There's like different storylines, right? Um, but for that particular storyline, um, Jean was, got pregnant, and she had a Rachel. So Rachel ended up being just this ultra powerful. Her power was through the roof. Because if your parents are Cyclops and Jean Grey, then there you go. Um, okay, so this here, same thing, weird breakup of text. So I'm just gonna, I can already see where that's going because that pattern is the same. So yeah, in this particular story, she's just found out she's pregnant, and of course, Cyclops will start freaking out because that's what dads do. Okay, so it broke up again, which is weird. Yep, it broke up again. What's that, 30? Let me see how. Pregnant, you're yes. We're yes. And in these, yep, starts freaking out. Okay. Okay, so this is the other thing that I read from the Hollywood Standard book on formatting screenplays. It's like the sound is capitalized. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, to be honest. The sound in the object that's making the sound is capitalized, if I remember the rule correctly. This looks like it's broken up too. Having technical difficulties. Yeah, so that's not right. I would copy and paste, but the last time I tried to do a selection, the page went all weird. Well, I should say cut and paste. And cut and paste this part. And yes, I had to research to make sure that I got their actual names correct. So instead of Storm, uh, Aurora Monroe is her actual name. Got to get the spelling right, that type of thing. Rogue's name's Anna. Gambit, you already know, is Remy. I think it's Remy LeBeau, you pronounce it. Remy LeBeau. Um, but again, even in the cartoon series, the animated series, they didn't call each other by their by their actual like real names. They always went by code names for the most part. But I just thought that it would be good for fans to know that. I'm not even sure like how much people dig into these details, but I feel like that would be good to add. And I think this part that Rogue is saying is interesting, that the relationship between her and Gambit has been better since the X Men split up. Because I think then they, like, you can put more time, more focus, more attention to relationship type things, and it's not always interrupted by we have to go and beat somebody up or save the world or something like that. So now we're going to the part where it kind of reminds me of Avengers in a way, where you had these character introductions where you see Iron Man standing next to Captain America for the first time, right? And then in the Avengers, they had it to where Captain America goes Mr. Stark, Iron Man says Captain, and that was just during. But it's like seeing them on the screen together, uh, that was crazy. It was crazy. But it's like the filmmakers, they realize those types of moments are special, right? Because Iron Man had his own films, or at least what, two of them, one or two. Um, Captain had one, which was the first. I think it was called the first Avenger or something like that. So yeah, and I mean the first Iron Man and the first Avenger was. I mean the first Avenger was a little not awesome, but it wasn't terrible. Um, and then I thought the second movie with Captain America by himself, that movie was really good, right? But the first one, it was like you had to get through all the foundation stuff first. So it was a lot of information to go through. establishing the character, right? So then by the time you get to Avengers, you don't need to waste time going through the origin of every character because they've already been introduced. We've already gone through the origin part of it, so you have to get that part done before. Well, it's better that way. You don't have to, but it's better to me that way. I think that's what happened with Justice League, to where the you did have this assembly of characters, but they all weren't, and I guess they don't all have to be, but it's like they wanted to go into a lot of detail with their origin stories. So I think you had to watch the director's cut, which was like, I don't know how it was, an hour longer than the original movie, hour and a half longer. But you just need time to go into everybody's story before you can just throw everybody together and say, okay, you're a team. Um, so yeah, the original theater version, it felt short and rushed, which it was because you don't have enough time to focus on each character, right? But I think Wonder Woman had her own um, movie. Of course, Batman. I mean, how many times are we gonna have a Batman film? I think Aquaman already had the movie by his self, and so there was that. But it was like Flash, Cyborg. They really did want to dive into them a little bit more in terms of introducing their characters, and it just that takes a while because the crazy thing is like when you're doing your casting, I guess the thing that you really have to understand or you really have to find out is the audience going to like this person cast as this character, and that's the huge unknown. Like, are people gonna like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark? And of course we do. Like he fit, right? But you don't know like for sure until you throw him on screen and you tell everybody, okay, this is Tony Stark, this is Iron Man, right? Or Chris Evans, you put him on screen, okay, this is Captain America, and everybody has to buy into that. If they don't buy into the casting and they say, okay, this actor or actress doesn't fit this role, then the entire story is going to be messed up, right? So it's good to get that part out of the way first to understand, okay, does the audience accept the character or the casting for this character? Um, and if they have, then you can just roll with it. And when you do make mistakes along the way, it's more like it's not like a hard fall, right? Because people like the character. So yeah, I think with Justice League there was a little bit of that. Um, it was a little bit of that. Now I will say for them, for Batman, it was Ben Affleck. I totally didn't think that was gonna work when I first heard about their casting choice, and then I watched the film, and I'm like, he's fine. It works for what they were doing for that particular version of Bat, because there's like so many different versions of of Batman. So it's you have to create the version for the style of movie that you're making. He has to fit into that version of it, and not everything else that's been made. It doesn't matter because they're like different universes or whatever. Um, but I did feel like Ben Affleck worked with that, and I was surprised too. I was like, wow, he works for this. Um, I saw the new one, the Batman, um, and that works too. Totally different approach in terms of the mood. Um, Like the Dark Knight series, it was dark, but it wasn't nearly as gritty as the what's his name? Robert, I think it's Robert Patterson is his name. Not nearly as gritty as the Robert Patterson Batman, to where it was like in the Batman, he was legit wearing metal armor. Like that thing looked heavy. And you can hear him walking down a hall or wherever, it was like boom, boom, because he's armored up and he's getting shot point blank range with shotguns and I'm like, oh my gosh, he was armored up. Like he was like a moving tank walking around in the shape of a bat. So that part of it was a lot more gritty than um, the Dark Knight trilogy. Yeah, you have to. It's all about style. Because there was complaints too that oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on her name. The woman who played Catwoman in the Batman. They were like, she could have. I think she tried to have that role in the Dark Knight trilogy, and people were saying, well, she doesn't fit in style or something like that. I'm gonna say I agree with that, even though it sounds harsh, because she has a really, I think it's Zoe Kravitz. She has a really gritty edge to her personality. She just does. Um, and I saw like a headline of her like the day before yesterday or something, and she's going out with Channing or some other actor, right? The way that she presents herself in public, it comes across as edgy, gritty, just not as approachable, as an Anne Hathaway. And so if you put her alongside Christian Bale, is that going to be a believable fit in terms of them even possibly being a couple? I would say no. That I don't, and it's not because there's something wrong with her or there's something wrong with Christian Bale. It's that the two people have to look like they even fit together on screen, right? If they don't look like they're a couple, like believably a couple, then it doesn't matter if they're a good actor actress. It's not going to work in terms of from the audience's perspective. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration. Now, Zoe Kravitz with Robert Patterson, and Robert Patterson's character was like moody. you know, he was like, he presented himself as very, very dark, more grit, more moody. And then when he got with Zoe Kravitz, it was like they clicked. It was like this, okay, this works. This fits together. And I wouldn't have thought to put those two together, but I'm just saying it worked, right? So yeah, it just depends on the not only the role that you're going for, that you're trying to get, but what's the mood, the style of the film. And if you're sticking out, it's just gonna throw off the story. It's gonna throw off the audience's attention, because we've been in movies before where it's like she ain't gonna go out with him. I'm just like, he's out of her out of her league or something. It's just like, no, they don't go together. Um, where have I? When have I? I guess the last time I felt that was when I was watching Venom. I think it was Greg Hardy's character in. I think her name's Michelle Williams, and I just looked at him and I was like, Hardy's character was too dark and gritty for her, because she looked, and of course they kind of, this kind of played out in the film as well, where she was just straight and narrow. You know, it. it's just like they didn't belong in the same part of town or something like that. It was just like she was upper class, and Hardy's character was kind of he was a loose cannon, right? So when they were together on screen, it was like, do they really go together? And I just never bought it, and that was it was hard for me to swallow. But yeah, I mean, it just throws off the film because it's like you're just staring at these people like I don't think they really go to in the middle of their conversation while they're trying to tell you what's going on in the film. I'm sitting there thinking like I don't think that she would really go out with him. I was like, no. So again, when I'm writing, I'm envisioning characters that fit together, whether it's friendship, relationship, whatever. It's like they have to fit. Now, once you go into casting, like I have no idea. You just pray. You just pray like God, please let them pick the right people for this. Because what's in my mind can also be in their mind, but that doesn't mean that that person's available to be cast for that part. So it's man, that's a tough part. All right, so I'm gonna try to wrap this up in a few pages here. I think. Yeah, excuse me, because it's already almost 4 o'clock. So I'm gonna take a break for the rest of the weekend. Now, this week is gonna be a regular 5 day work week for me in terms of going to my day job, and then when I come home at night or in the evening time, I work on stuff like this or photography, or, that type of thing. Um, Next week, I believe Monday is going to be Labor Day of next week. So I'm going to have like Sunday next week. I'm not going to have to be too concerned with time or my schedule. But right now, I know I'm going to need a break. I'm going to need a break for the rest of the day. Okay, so we went to page 33. Now, Gambit is saying or asking the question, we're having dinner together like old times. They head for the kitchen area. Precisely, I think this would be the best environment to have this conversation, says Professor Xavier. So, this is like I was saying before, the Iron Man, Captain America type thing where you get all the characters we want to see, or not all, but a lot of them that we want to see on the screen together. We get them in the same room. They're all eating, they're all being normal. And we saw some of this in Age of Ultron with the Avengers, um, where they come to the party at Tony Stark's house or wherever whatever room they were in, and they were just having these conversations and telling war stories and all this other type of stuff, and you just see them being normal people, and it's one of the best parts of the film. So again, like 12 some odd years ago, whenever when I wrote this, I wanted to have that scene or that type of scene in an X-Men film because you just want to see these people, like if you run into them on a on the sidewalk, on walking down the street or something, it's like see them more normal, right? They're everyday, kick back, laughing, making jokes, whatever the case may be. So you kind of you you become more aware of just their individual personalities, and yeah, it's just really good to see. And then when you see them in their action scenes and stuff like that, there's a closer bond between all the characters, right? And then between the characters and the audience as well. So this is where I left off for part one. I'm gonna go ahead and save. And again, I'm gonna submit this off for review. I don't know what they're going to say with this. And then as far as vocal, it is, as far as likes, comments, whatever. The short story "She Knew Who I Was" is still the best in terms of response, and which is weird because I wrote. There's no other story in my collection like that one. Um, and from reading some of the comments, it's like people are like, "Well, when is the next when's the next chapter? Where are you gonna go after this one?" And it's like, no, this is it. This I sat down one day and I just wrote everything out, and then that was it. That was the end of it. And trying to write something else, added to it. I don't know if that would be the best thing to do because I don't want to mess it up. But anyway, um, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and submit this. The other thing that I have to do today, which I'm probably gonna do it, um, or work on off stream, is the Artdex has their competition. Um, Artdex has their competition. The deadline is the 30th. Was it Tuesday? What is today? Gosh, it's the 28th already. Yeah, Wednesday. It's either Tuesday or Wednesday. The 30th, I think, is the deadline. So I'm gonna submit some photography there, and I'm probably gonna dig through the new stuff that I've been working on, um, and submit it. But yeah, I have a profile. You create a profile. The profile is free to create, and you upload your work, small JPEGs, whatever you have there, small file, and yeah, you label your folder correctly. What they give you a title to label the folder as, but you can create as many folders as you want, I believe. But the folder for the contest, you label it with whatever label is there in the rules, so that the judges know, okay, this is the folder that's with the work in it for the contest. And I think the winner is announced, or winners are announced on September 15th, I believe. So I usually enter this every year. I think it's annual. I have not placed or won anything before. So the thing that I always say, create better work. That's what I tell myself. So really, it's not a me comparing myself to other artists. It's saying, it's looking at my work and saying, you know what, I can be a little bit better. And just every time I have a project, or, get a little bit better. And as the years go by and you continue to get a little bit better every time, you end up with some amazing stuff, you know? So yeah. So that's part one of nine that I hope that will be approved to be published on Vocal. And you can leave comments, insights, you can like it, share, that type of thing. And but see, the short story "She Knew Who I Was," with that one, most of my traffic is coming from the vocal community, right? So I want to start sharing work that's has a larger audience, right? So people who are not even in the vocal community, more people like that, will end up finding my stories in searches, or places online. So, well, searches, yeah, through Google or Bing or whatever they use as their web browser. Um, so yeah, and a bunch of people love X Men, myself included. Um, I'll leave off with my top three favorite characters. Wolverine has to be first. Second and third place are kind of, I can't really say it's a tie. I'm gonna give second place to Nightcrawler, and third is gonna go to Colossus. Now, Colossus has not gotten a lot of love. He didn't get a lot of love even in the live action films. In the animated series, they gave him one or two episodes, maybe. They gave him a few episodes, I think, in the animated series. And then I did have the card, the trading card for him, which was pretty good. But yeah, so those are my three: Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and I wanted to give them all a pretty good, as far as screen time, give them pretty good. But I will admit, Wolverine sort of took a back seat in my screenplay because he got he was just predominant in the X-Men films, and then as I saw after that, um he got his own films, just him. You had Wolverine Origins, and then you had the Logan film, which was very depressing. But yeah, I mean, just Hugh Jackman fit that character, and they just there's a lot of movies, and then even in the X Men films, even in the larger cast, he just dominated in terms of like screen time and how important of a character he was. And so in this screenplay, gosh, I definitely would say that he takes more of a backseat. He's not completely invisible. Um, he does have, I try to give these characters also a moment, like a signature moment. I try to give a lot of them a signature moment, um, that readers can like be like, wow, that's, something that really stands out. So he does have that. But overall, I would definitely say, especially in comparison of the live action films, my Wolverine has more of a backseat in it. And with Cyclops, I would say I try to make him more of a leader. Um, like you would understand why he's in a leadership role, whereas in the live action films, I felt like he was there, but like we really didn't look at him as the leader of the group. And I thought that viewers, readers, we have to understand why Professor Xavier is saying, "Okay, Cyclops, you can lead," and then Storm, you can be second as far as team lead, right? Um, yeah, so I thought the X Men films they could have done better with that, with understanding why Cyclops is the lead, Storm is the second in command. If Cyclops is not there, Storm is leading the charge, right? Or they would just split them off into two different groups. Cyclops, you lead this group. Storm, you lead this group, and you see in their personality why they are in charge. Um, but especially with Cyclops, I just felt like they made him too. It's just like he took a backseat too much, you know. And you also have to understand why Jean Grey would pick Scott over Logan. And I think we really didn't see why that was as much as we could have in the films. And so, yeah. But man, that's what I've got for this particular stream. Now, this is in the not the proper category because it's under the art category. I didn't find a writing category on here, but yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and submit that. Um, And again, if it gets approved, there are 8 more parts to edit. And I have a better idea now of how I need to edit these and see what happens from there. Um, and then yeah, I just work on more stuff like this. Like this piece right here is one of my macro photography pieces, and my test prints for the new stuff is should be here tomorrow, and then my samples of photo paper should be here on Thursday. I want to say Wednesday or Thursday, whenever September 1st is. That's when they're scheduled to arrive. So this week I hope to approve the test prints. Hopefully have good reactions to the paper samples, and yeah, and then I have another update about how that's going. So I hope that everyone has a great rest of your weekend, of your Sunday. Thank you for tuning in and listening. And everybody, take care. God bless.